Hello and good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to welcome you to the Council on Foreign Relations, this edition of our distinguished guest lecture series. Today, we are spoiled for choice because we have three very distinguished guests. Our moderator, Dr. K.O. Amenin, I'm sure many of you must have met him when he was the UN resident coordinator in Sierra Leone, in Liberia, in Dakar. But I remember him most for the period in which he served as the UN resident coordinator in N'Djamena. And he used to come to my house and we will sit until 2, 3 a.m. discussing what he considered to be a very tenuous political situation in Chad. Usually when he had had long discussions with President Idriss Deby, he would then come and pour his anger on me. So I'm very glad to welcome Dr. Amenin, who will be moderating today's session. You know, our friend Dr. Abdel-Fatau Musah is known to all of you. In my view, he's one of Africa's most eminent peace academics and practitioners. You know, he's been helping us in ECOWAS, in the AU, and now in the UN. But he's shown particular interest in the stability of the sub-region. And of course, we're talking about the stability of the sub-region. I believe that's why many of you have tuned in today. We are all on tenterhooks since the assassination and the death of the former president. We're concerned about the transition. We're concerned about the issues of ethnicity. We're concerned about the interim arrangements which have been put in place. We're concerned that that the 18-month period is renewable. We're concerned that some of the political players are still contesting the leadership of the new military leader. We're concerned about what will happen to Niger, Mali, the whole Central. We're concerned about what will happen to Ghana, Burkina. So I'm not surprised at all that a lot of you have tuned in. Professor Bathily, our professor, a former Minister of Energy, a former Minister of African Affairs, a former Member of Parliament. And I think there are very few heads of states who have not in Africa who have not worked with him. I remember the time he was the UN Res Rep in the Central Region area. The AU was determined to make him the president of the African Union. And a lot of us were going for him because he does have the credentials. So ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, today we are completely spoiled. And I just hope that you will participate actively when our distinguished speakers have taken the floor. Dr. Amen, if you're ready, I hand over to you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Thank you very much, my dear brother and friend. First, let me thank you for the opportunity to moderate this all-important meeting. Let me also thank you and the Council on Foreign Relations for organizing this meeting. In fact, I personally, and in that sense, all those who I've talked to would agree with me that this meeting is both apt and opportune. Apt in the sense that it is very suitable that at this moment in time, we think and reflect upon what is happening in Chad. And it is also opportune in the sense that it is important that our discussions allow us to look at the opportunities that exist for us to use what is happening in Chad for the welfare, not only of the people of Chad, but also for this continent. So it is, in fact, an opportune moment, and I thank you very much for this. I know that many people would question why we should talk about Chad at this moment, because in their minds, I hear people say, but it is far. It's far away from us in West Africa. It is far away for those who live in North Africa. It's far away from the East. It's far away from the South. But as a matter of fact, nothing can be further away from the truth. It is not far. Chad is really in the very heart of Africa. And for that matter, it is important for all of us that Chad is able to sustain its stability and is able to become a prosperous and a stable country. It is not far because it is just next to Nigeria. And for those of us in Ghana know what Nigeria means to us in terms of our everyday life and everyday contacts. It is not far from Niger. We have about 2 million people in Ghana from Niger, over that. And it is very important that Niger also stays stable. At the moment, we are worried about Niger, since the western part of Niger, which touches Chad, is about to face the same problems of uncertainty because of the movements, military movements, and that which is occurring on this border with Chad. It is not far from Central Africa. In fact, it is next to Central Africa. We know what role Chad plays in Central Africa. And for that matter, it is not far also from Congo. It is not far from Sudan, where we've had a lot of contact. And my first contact with Chadians and with Chadian governments was when I was in 1985 on the border of Sudanese and Chad, working with refugees. And I know what happened, that the influx of representatives of the political and military groups that operated along the borders and the refugees in the late 60s, 70s, and 80s when we were there have affected also, or did affect also Darfur. So in a sense, we cannot say that the country is far, and therefore we will close our eyes to it. Through Niger, it touches Mali, through all the others, Mali, Niger, all of us in West Africa, the southern part of West Africa, also stand to be impacted by whatever happens in Chad. So it's important that we look at it. Now, if nothing at all, it is important that the whole of Africa, and for that matter, those of us who worked with the United Nations will say, the whole world gets interested in what is happening in Chad. Our nations founded in the 50s and 60s, our new nations were founded on the principle of African unity and therefore African solidarity. And therefore, I would wish that all of us, especially the youth of our days, continue to maintain the interest that we have in each other, because it's becoming apparent to all of us that unless we unite, support each other, and work together to promote prosperity on the continent and stability on that continent, none of us would attain the potential that Africa offers us. So I believe that such a discussion will help us understand why it is important that we make sure that all the challenges are looked at, examined, and met, and all the support that Chad needs are given to Chad. Chad, some people tend to think, is a very poor country. But if you look at the development index, it is very low. But we shouldn't look at Chad like that. Chad is potentially a very rich country. It has a lot of, even the northern part, which in contradistinction to what we have in the south, and people used to consider the south as the Chad util, Chad which is useful. The north is extremely useful. Chad in the north contains a lot of minerals that have been discovered. It also has oil, just as much as the south has. It has a huge quantity of underground water, which goes all the way from northern Chad all the way to Niger, to Sudan, and to Libya, which could change the fortunes of our Sahel area. So it contains a lot, and it should be of interest for all of us to see that the country is stable and is able to put in place the foundations for real prosperity for its people and for economic growth. So it is important that we get to know what the challenges of Chad are and how we can understand and help Chad to overcome its difficulties. My last but one point, is the fact that people tend to think that because Chad is far away from West Africa, which is not the case, we will not be easily impacted. But for this, let me tell you my own personal, I'll end on this with my personal experience. Quite young on the borders with Sudan and Chad, I was treated to a splendid spectacle in autumn in the Darfur area, where for a whole week we found a procession of a caravan of camels and livestock, cattle, goats, sheep, which were coming from Mali, Niger, all the way through northern Chad to come down through Darfur and descend into Central African Republic and the south of Chad. It's a wonderful spectacle. It is the Fulani, Bororo Fulanis, and the Arabized ethnic groups that are there. We're talking about thousands. Imagine that these people are not able to do what we normally, the French would call the transhumance saisonnière, or the seasonal migrations. With all these livestock, they can't go through Niger because Niger borders would have been closed or would have been suffering instabilities. Chad would have been in arms and in battle everywhere, and therefore would stretch all the way, and therefore they will be blocked. They will have no choice. They will rather stay in Mali, in Niger, where their cattle will be dying, and therefore imagine what will be the socioeconomic impact on these countries. Or that they might decide to descend south, towards Benin, towards Togo, towards Nigeria, towards Ghana, and imagine the ecological disaster that would have done to all these places. So it is important that Chad remains stable, and it is the responsibility of all of us that Chad is able to look at its challenges on the face and make the right choices and be able to stabilize the country and improve all the chances of economic prosperity. So thank you very much. I'm sure that by the end of the presentation that our two August presenters would have left with us, we would have been able not only to see how important it is that we have these discussions, but we'll be able to also see what lies ahead, what the issues and problems are, and how we can all collectively in our various areas, in our various occupations, in our various geographical positions, be able to whip up interest in Chad and find the right solution for that country. Thank you very much. Without much ado, can I invite first Prof, my dear brother, colleague, and friend. Please, I leave you with the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, colleague, moderator. I think you have set indeed the scene for the reason of this gathering. And I would like, first of all, to tell my appreciation for this initiative, which is very much online with what the Ghana people have stood for, always, the Pan-African ideals. It can't be otherwise in the country of Kwame Nkrumah. I think why Chad is important for us. As a historian, I would just say, first of all, because it's the land of Tumai. Tumai is the name given to the remains of the first human being, as far as the archaeological findings can show today. 7 million years ago, Tumai stood up and became a symbol of the human being standing to conquer nature and to pave the way for human progress. So Chad is the land of Tumai, first. Secondly, I think it is important for us all as Africans to see why Chad is important, why we should be interested in the crisis in Chad, because of its geographical position. For geopolitical reasons, we must follow carefully the events in Chad. Chad shares borders with 6 countries from 4 sub-regions on the African continent. 6 countries: Nigeria, Niger, Libya, Central African Republic, Sudan, Cameroon. As I said, 4 sub-regions: Central Africa region, West Africa region, North Africa region, East Africa region. So Chad is at the core of Africa. It's the heart of Africa. Historically, this land has been a laboratory for African civilization in general, because of its position at the crossroads of almost all the regions, sub-regions of Africa. It has witnessed the rise of the first early states in that part of the continent, south of the Sahara, apart from Egypt. The famous Kanem-Bornu Empire, which flourished from the 9th century to the 19th century, until the conquest of the Europeans. So this is for geographical, for historical, for political reasons. As we can see. The second important reason why we should be interested in what is happening in Chad is that over the last 30 years, the Idriss Deby Itno's regime has played an important role in the security situation in all that part of our continent. Therefore, West Africa is concerned. As you know, you just mentioned Chad is part of G5 Sahel. Chad is part of the multinational joint task force for the Lake Chad Basin. Chad has forces in MINUSMA, that is the United Nations multinational, multidimensional mission, peacekeeping missions in Mali. And for that reason, before it has played a major role along with France to re-establish the government authority of Mali over most of its territory. Chad is also a member of another subgrouping regional organization, that is the CENSTAD. So for all these reasons, Chad is at the heart of the security issues and therefore political issues in the sub-region. And Idriss Deby Itno stood as the bulwark of the fight against terrorism in the whole Sahel region. We may come back to that later. The third reason is, you mentioned it, the economic reasons. the importance of livestock. It's the main provider of livestock to not only West African, most of West African countries, Niger, but also Nigeria, but also Central Africa, Sudan. And therefore, for these economic reasons, the collapse of the Chad states might have implications for the livelihood of people throughout the Sahelian belt, including even the forest zone, the southern part of West Africa and Central Africa. So these are what I would just say at this point in my intervention. We have to be very aware of the fact that in spite of those 30 years in power, Idriss Deby, it knows, has not been able really to stabilize Chad in a sustainable manner. Although he has sent troops throughout the region. And in fact, Chad is in Africa, the country who has more troops outside its borders than any other on the continent. To police outside against terrorism, but to stabilize inside is another issue. And why we should be interested in the big development in Chad, a supplementary reason is that today Chad is threatened by rebel groups coming from the north, mainly Libya. And we have reasons to be wary about it because of the attempt at settlement of the Libyan crisis. The big powers want all what they call the mercenaries to come out of Libya. If they come out of Libya, of course, the natural routes they will take would be Chad. And in fact, as you all know, Libya is a kind of breeding ground for all sorts of rebel groups, terrorist groups, traffickers of all kinds today. And the so-called stabilization process in Libya would have an impact automatically on Chad, which we see already with the rebels of the Front pour le Changement et la Concorde, who hailed recently from Libya. And they have been doing that for the last few years, even before that. And in fact, most Chadian rebels, including Deby himself, Hassan Habre, Gukuni Wede, they all have fled at one time crossed from Libya into Chad to seize power. So Chad is a kind of nest for breeding rebel movement within and attracting rebel movement from without. So these, I think, give the importance of Chad in today, present day African geopolitics. You cannot talk about the crisis in Chad without having a look at what is happening in Sudan, in the Darfur region, in Kordofan, and of course in Central Africa. For the last 60 years, that country has been unstable. And Chad is their next door neighbor. And those two countries contribute to the instability or the stability of one another. So far, I think this is what I would like to say first as a kind of to launch the debate. My part. Again, thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this important conversation. Over to you.
I very much appreciate the historical, political, and economic perspectives you put to this challenge. Without much ado, let me just give the floor to Abdel-Fatau. My brother, how are you?
I'm very, very, very fine. Yeah, senior brother.
Yes.
You know, Amani. I also want to join Professor Bathily in thanking the Council on Foreign Relations for the important think tank role, trying to help shape Ghana, and also very, very, very praiseworthy. And I want to thank you, Ambassador D.K. Osei, Cabral Amihere, and all the fellows of this important think tank in the country. To begin with, in fact, Dr. Amanin and Professor Bathily have already launched it into a very important context. What I would say, as why Chad, with a population of 16 million or so, is so important today, and that what has happened in Chad has sent shockwaves, not only across Africa, but beyond. Even we have to look at that. And I think Professor Bathily has alluded to some of that. As Dr. Menin said, Chad is not poor at all. And we've seen all that has happened. Chad has been impoverished. That is the difference here. And it relates to governance issues, governance deficits in the country, and all that. Chad, historically, like we've been told, has been a warrior nation, since its formation. It has been a warrior nation. And that the Trans-Sahel caravans during the slave trade and other things passed through, that country. Lake Chad used to be, something like a resting place for sort of giving animals drink and other things, all in the past. Its importance in terms of the economic environment in the region cannot be overemphasized. Now, we should realize there are so many factors, environmental changes, that has led even Lake Chad to lose about 90% of its water mass, and what that entails. And it is also part of the triggers of the Boko Haram insurgency around the Lake Chad Basin. That is very important to note. The oil revenues in Chad have never translated into the well-being of the people, with Chad being towards the bottom end of the Human Development Index, of UNDP, of World Bank, and all that. Why is Chad so important? Chad, I think, from its warrior history, has found a meaning, to its being. And all that Professor Bathily was saying, to put it in context, is that Chad realized that it will rather depend on military diplomacy. Military diplomacy. I think it has been a very conscious undertaking under President Idriss Deby, Itno. Take, for example, Ghana has a population of about 30 million. Our armed forces are not more than 16,000. Nigeria, with a population of 200 to 250 million, its force strength is around 120,000. Chad with a population of barely 16 million, has an armed forces strength about 40 to 50,000, about 40 to 50,000, with not less than 450 generals in the country. Okay, that gives you a perspective as to where their diplomacy has been. And due to that, it has been at times an auxiliary force to other forces in trying to pacify the region. Professor Bathily talked about Mali. In fact, Chad was very influential in the Central African Republic in the wars between the Seleka and the Anti-Balaka, which is still brewing today. It is very significant to know that during the funeral of Deby, only 2 heads of state from the Central Africa region actually attended, whereas 6 attended from West Africa. It tells you about the political, dynamics in the country. So this military diplomacy, in the context of today's asymmetric warfare, terrorism, that is, has been the major security concern of all our, countries in the sub-region, makes Chad a very important element. And if it goes down, it's going to be very serious. In fact, since the death of Deby, terrorism has spiked in Mali, in the Borno region of northeastern Nigeria. There have been attacks on super camps that were set up, over there, and the whole farmer-herder dynamics in the region is also taking a new dimension. This just gives you the impact of what is happening, in Chad, because it is the one that has actually been the most effective fighting force when it comes to Mali, when it comes to the fight against ISWAP, the Islamic State West Africa province, the breakaway group from the Boko Haram, franchise, over there, and all that. And today, another element we have to look is that politics in Africa is being ethnicized, with people being put into boxes based on religion, based on ethnicity. And like we heard from Professor Bathily and others, if you look at the Fulani, and other today, people tend to look at what is happening in West Africa like it is the Fulani herder communities that are developing into a Pan-Africanist group against agriculturists and other Southerners who are Christian. It's a very simplistic view. And I think the events in Chad, should help us, to go into this, because you cannot talk about Chad as being ethnic-based per se. Chad, very much like in much of Somalia and other places, is a country based on, clans. You have the Zagawa, the Goran, the Tebu, and all these dynamics that are happening there also play into those, clan divisions, patronage, lack of it, marginalization. So it is about the loss of the military power of Chad today, not so much economic, not so much, social, not so much political, but the military diplomacy of Chad is something that is at stake. And I think that is where, this discussion is going on against the background of the asymmetric environment that the continent finds itself today. And with, foreign forces, coming onto the continent and what that entails, for the independence of the African countries and also their say on the international scene. So I just wanted to emphasize that element, that military aspect of it as an introductory, sort of, few introductory words before we go into the details of the dynamics, on the continent following the death of Deby. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Abdel-Fatau. This again adds to the broad perspective and the rather complex context in which our important conversation can be held. Can I, before I leave the floor for people to ask questions, yes, can I just summarize in a sentence I'd written in advance? If Chad is at the crossroad of all Africa, it's the very heart of Africa, it is also the microcosm of Africa. It's all Africa together in a small sort of setup. The problems that Chad seems to be grappling with are problems of building a nation out of multiple and diverse ethnic groups, diverse religious affiliations, diverse lifestyle, and at the same time, in a context of how you respond to the socioeconomic and everyday needs of people who are moving away or have to move away by the imperatives of the 21st century, have to move away from their context of peasantry, herding, and all that into a more modern economy. This is something that Africa is facing everywhere. But in addition to this, and I think this is what we need to address too, but in addition to this, the weaknesses and attractions of Chad and the challenges of Chad also attract foreign and exterior interventions and interferences, which in a sense, we can't wish away and it won't fade off. Because as we said earlier, it's a country of vital importance to us all. The question therefore will be, how do we help Chad to manage these challenges, which all have in our various countries, but in small degrees? They have it in an exaggerated form. How do we help them to manage this? Because if we are able to find out what needs to be done, we would also benefit in our various African countries from the lessons learned and what we need to be able to add to, subtract, or use to make our countries, various countries also enhance our stability and our economic progress. So let's look at this too. What, in the context of these complexities, of these challenges, particularly in the context of Chad now, considering that this military diplomacy, in all honesty, Abdel-Fatau and Professor Bathily, can't continue for long because it was done at the expense of real socioeconomic progress of the Chadians themselves. Keeping an army of 450 generals, of almost 45,000, not counting about those who are not officially soldiers, but who are some sort of semi-soldiers, which we recruit, put discharge when and as the needs arise. All this costs a lot of money. I was in UNDP Res Rep when we tried to see how we could streamline the army. And we had all sorts of discussions on this, and we couldn't do it. Because, as you said earlier, if it becomes a military diplomacy, then of course it becomes also one of their vital sectors of activity. How do we demilitarize this country and allow the civil society, which emerged only after the 1993 Conference Nationale? How do we strengthen it? How do we strengthen the democratic institutions which they put in place in their Conference Nationale so that they take root? There's a deep interest among the civilian population for democratization and a civil sort of life. What ideas do we have to be able to promote that? Thank you. May I have your
Thank
comments,
you.
and then we'll now start asking questions from the floor. Thank you.
Yeah, just a few considerations on this. I think the military diplomacy, as Fatau has rightly put it, is not sustainable. Keeping an armies of this size, whatever the resources, it is not sustainable. So I think this crisis, the death of Deby, should be seized as an opportunity to change course in terms of governance of the country. Because, first of all, before 1990, when Deby seized power violently through armed rebellion and kicked out Hissène Habré, Chad have witnessed 30 years before of armed conflict, civil wars. And since he came, this pattern of violence in governance has not significantly changed. Yes, oil has come. It has replenished the coffers of the government, but the consequences for the mass of the people are scanty. So I think governance has to change. The issue, when you look or you hear what the people in the street are saying, I have served as a UN Special Representative for Central Africa for 3.5 years, and I visited several times Chad. I met several times with civil society organizations, with President Deby himself, etc., etc. But what I have noticed is that this country is in need of very fundamental reforms in terms of governance. The North-South divide is real, it is there. The issue of ethnic politics is there. It is true when you look at the results of the Panama Papers, what it has revealed in terms of governance, in terms of diversion of resources at the expense of the people for a minority, governing minority. You will see the gap, and you could understand also the current situation. So I think the call for more dialogue in the country, the call for a change of governance, the call for better management of the diversity in the country. Diversity, South, North, East, West, diversity of the ethnic group, of the cultural group, Muslim, Christians, all these diversity has to be taken into account. I hope that the call for dialogue, which is made by many sections of the country, the transitional arrangement which is being made now will take that into account, and will, for now, Chad will really go for a more democratized governance than it has witnessed so far. So I think we all hope that a new experience will come out of this tragedy. So this is what I would like to say for now.
No, thank you, Prof.
Because all the military cannot, the military or the security arrangement, Chad cannot remain as a providers of military corps expeditionnaires throughout the Sahel. This is not sustainable for Chad. It is it's not possible. we are gun for hire. Chad cannot continue to play that role.
Okay.
So it means also that the regional organization has to take their own responsibility. We will come back to later, maybe in the debate, as we examine the perspectives.
Yeah, maybe
Thank
if
you.
I can
Yes.
throw in, a little bit of addition, to it about this, dialogue. I want to look at what we can do to help Chad from two fronts. What can we do within the, concerning the internal situation in Chad, and what should our regional leaders, should do, because it is not just by accident that the military option has become the go-to tool, today, because of the various nature of the security environment that we have. Already, the Transitional Military Council, led by the son of Deby, that's Muhammad Deby Kaka, has already rejected any dialogue with the FACT, the rebel group or any other armed group. But that should be maybe an opening gambit. The president of Niger, Mohamed Bazoum, and the president of Mauritania, El Ghazouani, have been playing the go-between to try to bring about some kind of dialogue between the sides. So far, that has failed. As we speak now, FACT and about 3 other groups have moved back into southern Libya, going to regroup, okay? And as we speak, there is an African Union delegation in Chad, which is meeting with all stakeholders in the country with a view to finding, something like a consensual and inclusive transition that is going to last 18 months after this. But already there are a lot of problems involved, in it. What we will come with is about a version of the transition that we are experiencing now in Mali, following the overthrow of the president there, one form or the other. That has to go on, and at the end of the 18 months, to have free and fair elections in the country, to look at all the issues, bring people together, like Professor Bathily has said, the ethnic groups in particular. People are saying that General Kaka is going to be somebody like the President for Nyasingbe in Togo, giving the North-South dichotomy in Togo, because For's mother is from the South, the father from the North. The same thing people are talking about Kaka, whose father is from the Zagawa and the mother from the Goran family. So they feel that is something that should be utilized, but I don't know how far that will go. But the national dialogue is very important for a transition. Right now, the difference is that even Deby's party is saying that the government itself, the transitional government, the leaders cannot, sort of present themselves as candidates in the coming elections at the end of 18 months. But they want the 18-member military council to be exempt from that, meaning the military leader can stand as, as a presidential candidate in the elections. And that is going to be a very difficult red line for civil society groups and others, like Cape Zerbo and then others who will not accept it. That is what I do. So the regional leaders have to come together, try to help them to have a breakthrough, a national consensus on a transition, civilian-led, leading to fresh election. That's just going to be the beginning, because the nature of the crisis in the country is said that it's going to take a lot more to stop the recurrent rebellions. In fact, President Deby alone faced about 20 rebellions, And he was able to crush them mainly because of the help of the French forces. Barkhane was, logistics base of Barkhane is based in Chad. So that is not sustainable. But beyond that, it's an appeal to our regional leaders, ECOWAS, and I think the media summit in Accra is a very important forum where things have to be done. The others have to come to the plate. Okay, Nigeria, Ghana, and others, because as we speak, the whole of the coastal states of West Africa are not, actually free at all from incursions. Already we've seen incursions into Côte d'Ivoire, Kafolo, in Grand Bassam. We have seen some in northern, Benin. And Ghana, so far, what has helped Ghana a little bit is because the linguistic difference, the fact that English is the main language here, is sort of preventing people from mingling in the country, unlike our neighbors. But that is only a temporary reprieve. So we have to look at how we can move forward. The Accra initiative that was started by His Excellency President Nana Akufo-Addo, which has, sort of bludgeoned into what they call the ECOWAS counter-terrorism strategy, and how to really implement it to make sure that the southern rim of the Sahel is secure, either bilaterally or multilaterally. That is very important, because I think today, the governance issues are there, but we are facing imminent threat, from terrorism and violent extremism. And I think the ECOWAS summit has to make sure this is a priority. Thank you.
Very much. Can I now, would you want to say something? Before I leave the floor, can I just say something about what Abdel-Fatau just said? Given the importance of France in protecting the past regime for nearly 30 years, don't you think it would be important that there is a certain understanding between France and the African leaders as to what is the general paradigm within which we're going to operate? The move from military diplomacy into a country that is now normal and that is devoted to looking at the welfare of its own people. Because French interest and French perception of where we should go is also important. Yeah. Okay. Prof, would you have any comments on this before we leave it to the floor?
Well, I think since the colonial days, Chad was a sort of military colony. Territoire militaire, du Tchad, territoire militaire du Niger. You remember at the close of the 19th century, there was this fierce rivalry between Britain and France. The Fashoda episode in 1898 is well known. So Chad and Sudan are the sort of point of fierce rivalry between the two imperial powers since the end of the 19th century. And during the colonial period, this mentality has survived. Apart from southern Chad, which was regarded as le Chad utile because it's produced cotton, the rest of the territory northwards was considered as a military territory where the French bases are there to watch out British interests, to watch out Libya, to watch out Egypt, etc. And after independence, this the picture has not changed. Up until now, Chad is considered as the gatekeeper of French interests in the region. But it's true. That's true. And I think even looking at it strategically, which is a wrong strategy, because as I said, this military option for Chad is not sustainable. It will collapse and it will create more havoc in long term. Therefore, they have to change. Not only Chad rulers have to change their own policy inside, but also France also has to reinvent it, I must say, Chad policy or whatever you may call. If they don't do this, they will lose everything. You will remember that during the demonstrations of young people in Chad recently, the French flag has been burnt, which means that there is a strong feeling, a strong resentment against the French presence and the option of the Chadian government to be a kind of suppletive force for French policy in Africa. And it is important also for the other partners in the region, be from the G5, Sahel, be it from ECOWAS, from ECAS, to realize that we have no other option given the world as it is today, to have a common African policy, a common African strategy. ECOWAS and ECAS has to come together, chart a way forward for our collective security. West Africa, Central Africa, North Africa. If we don't do that, we will be just continue to be pawns in external strategies. This is what so far I have to.
Thank you very much, Professor Bathily. I fully agree with you, and I think these are pertinent points that you and Abdel-Fatau have presented to us. Dr. Mohammed Chambers, hi. Can I leave you the floor, please? I can see your hand is up.
Thank you very much, my brother Kingsley, and let me also join in thanking the chair of CFR, Ambassador Say, of course, Ambassador Cabral, for convening this meeting, and our two discussants, Professor Bathily and Dr. Abdel-Fatau Musah, for presentations that, as we know, are very high quality. It comes with their reputation. So many issues have been raised, and I'll just maybe hop on one or two. You asked a question about an African position which partners should support. I think we already have our normative frameworks, we have our protocols and our mechanisms for dealing with conflicts of this nature. When there is, as we have seen in Chad, military intervention, the AU team is there, they're doing their fact-finding work. They will then take it to the Peace and Security Council. What is regrettable is that unlike with ECOWAS, the ECAS doesn't have a very well-defined protocols on conflict mechanism for prevention, mediation, etc., including, of course, additional protocols on democracy and good governance. So there's a void in that regard. But I think the AU is there. We have our normative framework. We need to insist on at least some minimal standards to be maintained. Otherwise, bad precedents will be set and it becomes a problem down the line. Dr. Fatau has mentioned about the ECOWAS summit that is coming up under Ghana's leadership. Of course, ECOWAS has started to collaborate rather closely with ECAS, so perhaps there will be an opportunity to express some solidarity regarding the situation there, which is strictly within the ECAS domain. But because of the wider implications of the situation in Lake Chad Basin and the Sahel, and the involvement of Chad through its military. We have an interest there. Don't forget that Ghana forfeited its candidature at the AU recently in solidarity with Chad, precisely because of the role that it is playing, and I'm best placed to talk about that. So we acknowledge that role. However, at this point, when some naked truths are also staring us in the face, how do we go beyond the short term to start dealing with Kingsley? You lived in Chad and you know the situation there. SRSG Bathily worked in Chad. I myself, I had oversight for some aspects of Chad, the fight against Boko Haram and terrorism. And also when I was in Darfur, the implications of Chad in Darfur and all of that. We have concluded, I think all of that, it does have an overblown army, which is not professionally structured. They tend to be tribal youth who are hurriedly recruited, thrown into battle. They show a lot of bravery, bravado, and they win some battlefield victories, but you cannot talk of a professional army in Chad. That needs to be addressed going forward. The poverty, I mean, it's incredible, the level of poverty in a country like Chad, in the midst of the huge resources that we've all identified. So there has to be, going forward, serious efforts at achieving sustainable development that impacts the population, the resource utilization, to avoid state capture by a family or a clan or a few elite that denies the rest of the population resources, and which are at the root of all these different rebel movements that keep coming up one time or the other. The nature of recruiting to the army, the nature of resource capture by the state. Governance is also another domain which has been identified, which we need to look at. And I think in that regard, going forward, within the frameworks that we have identified on the continent of what constitutes minimally accepted standards of governance, the participation of citizenry, ability to every so often, freely and in a credible manner, choose their leaders, involvement of youth and women. The protests that we're talking about were mostly of women and youth who constitute the majority of the population. So how are we going to support processes that empower and bring them to the fore? So these are some of the issues going forward. In the short term, maybe one can accommodate some level of Chadian particularity for a transition, but going forward, there cannot be acceptance or variance to accepted norms for good governance, good democratic transitions. We've all gone through it in our countries. We didn't wake up one day and be a model of democracy in Africa. We went through processes where we build block by block, and Chad has to start somewhere. And I think we have to be careful not to excuse the necessity to go to basics and ensure that ultimately a sustainable, peaceful society is created where all Chadians can aspire to be included in different processes and also in the benefit of the resources of the country. So these are some of the comments that I would like to make at this point. But I agree with all the tentacles. I mean, only the other day, a friend of mine in Sudan sent me a picture of Mini Minawi already in N'Djamena, meeting with young Deby. That's the Darfur connection right there. You know? So all those connections are there.
Yes.
Yeah, but we need to also bring Chad on board to start somewhere towards ensuring that it can be sustainable peace based on solid democratic principles. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Professor Techua, your hand is up, please.
Actually, I'm going to wait until William has spoken because his hand was up first. So if you don't mind.
Thank you for your, thank you very much for your high sense of equity. Ambassador Hunado. Yes, we can't hear you. Please unmute yourself.
I was rather doing the video. Sorry. Yeah, hello. Can you hear me?
Can hear you. Yes.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
I was actually deferring to my senior sister, Prof. But so just two quick questions. First of all, let me thank our distinguished speakers for the education, and our moderator for preceding that, and of course my own boss, Dr. Chambers, for the additional insights. Two quick questions. First of all, in terms of this military diplomacy, is it possible for you to throw some more light as to what drove Chad into this type of military diplomacy that is not supported by its economic muscle, the domestic drivers and the external drivers? Then with regard to the second the question is to do with the way we prioritize. I was thinking that what Chad needs now is some fresh air in terms of the immediate, this transition period, because they themselves, I believe, are already reflecting on what they have gone through that they need to correct. So in that regard, the different stakeholders as already outlined, what should be done, especially from outside of Chad, to support them in this critical transition period. And as Dr. Chambers had mentioned, there is already a framework, and I'm aware that his office, was his former office, supporting ECOWAS, and UNOCA supporting ECAS, have helped these two regs to create a joint platform, particularly in the area of peace and security, initially with the joint maritime security, and more recently to counter extreme violence and fight extremism and fight violence. And the July 2018 joint summit of ECAS has already come out with a declaration which provides a framework. And I'm aware they are working on a strategic plan in that regard. There's supposed to be a joint summit outstanding between the two. So my humble suggestion is that to the extent that Ghana is in the chair of ECOWAS and Congo is chairing ECAS, particularly so because they have copied ECOWAS institutional reforms and they are only just now starting. But they are so excited about ECOWAS experience that they want to flow with ECOWAS. So perhaps 3 points for ECOWAS to support and accompany ECAS in addressing this problem that they have in the region. So thank you very much, moderator, and thank you, Prof, for allowing your younger brother to speak before you. Fatau, you are spared because my boss is on the line, so I won't make any additional comments.
Thank you very much, Winada. Techua, please, Prof.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I think that we've had a very privileged afternoon to have brought together three speakers who are both all passionate and knowledgeable about the area that we are discussing. My friend and brother Bathyly's historical insights are really invaluable. And of course, we can always depend on Abdel-Fatau to bring us up on the latest security situation. I was struck by a comment, I think it was a moderator who made it, about Chad, the situation in Chad as a microcosm of what was happening in Africa. And as a teacher, I'm concerned, particularly about the youth. And Fatau made a statement that Chad is not poor. it has been impoverished. And that perception of Chad as a poor country also feeds into the kind of attention that people would normally pay to the problems in Chad. And I think that the speakers have shown us very, very powerfully why we cannot afford to ignore Chad. On the CFR platform, we have had the opportunity of exchanging material that has really told us about the geopolitics of the situation. But I just pursuing the line of Chad as a microcosm of African society. Africa Liberation Day is coming up, and I'm wondering what more we could do to bring the issues to a wider audience, to really appreciate that it is not, as the moderator said, you know, all the issues about African unity and solidarity, we mouth it, but we do not often concretize it, you know. So how do we really bring it up to show that it's in our interest? And that kind of understanding is so important, because we're facing the same kinds of issues in our countries, the frustrations of youth, etc. In Ghana, we have our own issues, we have our own mobilizations. And it's so easy to be very present-minded and not focus on the larger historical trends. If you have a country that has been set up as an territoire militaire, it's not something that you kind of overnight flip over, you know. And from all the points that have been made, it is clear that Chad has not undergone, not only Chad, but all of Central African Republic, Central Africa has not undergone the democratic transitions, however imperfect. And I want to disagree a bit with my brother, Dr. Chambers, you know, about the model democracies, whatever. But clearly, Central Africa has not undergone that democratic transition. And so whatever actions are planned for Chad has to even take in the rest of the region. You cannot democratize Chad when Central Africa Republic is still disintegrating, you know. And to think that, Mr. Moderator, that France would give up its privileged position to help us, I think that France would have to be almost pushed to get there, which underscores the importance of this dialogue that we are having and the need to broaden it. So for instance, I'm wondering whether in the next version that we have, there is a way of collaborating with Bathily so that our Senegalese counterparts, there could be mutual translation, and our Senegalese counterparts could also, you know, because we do need to take the initiative, yes, at the level of ECOWAS, but also at the level of civil society, to show that we are concerned and we are moving the stakes, and then people begin to take notice and move it. So in terms of how do we help Chad to manage the challenges, how do we help to move Chad towards the democratic transitions, how do we civilianize militaries, etc. There are lots of lessons from West Africa that can be shared, and clearly it is in our interest. And we also need to bring in the younger generation so that the average age on our platform, which is listening to this, is not 55 or 60, but that the real inheritors are also invested in this conversation. I'm really concerned about that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, my sister Techua. Thank you. Can I give the mic to Atamensa Joseph?
Thank you so much for allowing me to speak up on this issue. Grateful always to my brother, Dr. Dike Osei, who always says wisdom always prevails. And Mr. Anani, I don't know if you remember me, but I think we met a number of times at the Hilton.
Yes.
In Addis. And to those who have spoken, my brother Fatau and my Ghanaian brother, Professor Bathily, and I know why I say he's my Ghanaian brother. I always have a lot of wisdom to learn from him, and of course, to Dr. Chambers, he's always very insightful. When this thing happened, and I think revealing the exchange, revealing my relationship with Dr. Chambers, I texted him immediately and I said, this is a problem for Ghana. And I said to him that is this a problem for Ghana because we've experienced, the Chadians have come to Ghana before in terms of refugees roaming our streets and begging for money. If you do remember, it's not that far. But having said that, I think this is a problem for the continent. And I'm glad that those who've spoken before me, particularly Professor Techuamenu, said in the question of this being a challenge for Africa. But how can Africa be strong to deal with this question when the AU, our own organization, the African Union, is not strong? African Union doesn't have the money to even continue to finance itself. We are always begging for money. You know very well, Fatau, that in any case, if you want to set up these things and to be independent, it will require that the African would have to have a military force itself in Chad. Who is going to pay for it? In Somalia, who is paying for Somalia? It's the EU. So I think we shouldn't, it's a difficult political economic question that we are faced with as to whether we can easily get rid of France or easily get rid of the partners. I mean, the external forces in Africa is huge. Now, the question is, as I said here as a student of economics, what do? You can either decide that you get into partnerships with others to stabilize, to neutralize the others. And if you get into partnerships, like for instance, Africa gets into partnership with America under Joe Biden's administration and becomes strong, then in this case, the Russians would want to come in, the Chinese would also want to come in, and you can never have your own identity in order to deal with yourself. So this is the challenge for Africans as we go in terms of that. We're faced with a country that's per capita GDP is about $700. You're faced in a country where there's poverty, women are deprived, and all that. How do you change that overnight? And we talked about the military diplomacy. I remember, Dr. Chambers, you remember that you went with me to the Gambia when the Gambia had the change of President Yahya Jammeh. And we brought in partners, we brought the groups together, we talked and all that. And at the time, we thought Adama Barrow was going to be there for only 3 years. He maneuvered, got rid of his vice president, got rid of others, and now he's there. So the question is, when you look into the political economy of these things, one has to sit back and ask, should you find a way to use the medium, to use the platforms that exist, for instance, in terms of having this military diplomacy, can we use that and gradually make the change? But that would take a while. So I don't know. So I would like my colleagues who have spoken here to comment on it. How can we strengthen the AU to be able to deal with such crisis? And for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Council on Foreign Relations, you've done a yeoman's job for bringing this point to get our cabinet to take it seriously. Get our cabinet to take it seriously, because it is not something that is likely that Chad is far away. They can walk and they will walk into our place, right? And so in terms of all these security questions and all that, we are just lucky that we don't have an issue of security concerns, but that is something which could also happen. And let's face it, Nigeria is not as strong as we would like it to be. It is not as strong as we would like it to be. So what if these terrorists dominate Nigeria? And let's not forget the Sahelian, from Senegal all the way. There's something what you call, you draw the number 7, and you see that the problem is there. And where I work in Ethiopia, we are also facing challenges. So it is a challenge for all around, and we have to find a way to deal with it. I thank you. I'm sorry that I've been too long about this, but I think it's a geopolitical, political economy question. And at the same time, we look at all these things and we still have to talk about SDGs and development and what have you. It is not an easy thing for Africa. I don't know where we start from, but we shouldn't give up. And I think we need to work each and every day to try. Because if we don't solve the Chadian question, our continental free trade area would not work. Would not work. Anyway, I stop here. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. I think we have quite a bit of important questions that have been raised, and I think which all push our conversation towards a very positive and fruitful direction. So I would leave the floor to Prof and to Dr. Abdel-Fatau to address some of these issues and give us pointers as to the measures that can be taken to continue this conversation and to come up with fruitful steps that can be taken in the way of supporting all the stakeholders who will be involved in addressing the challenges of Chad at the moment, and probably of the whole Central Africa and Sahel regions. Thank you. But yes, Prof.
Very good proposals have been put on the table, which I agree with. The idea that ECOWAS and ECAS together with the African Union should come together is obvious. I think this proposal should be on the table and put to the attention of all those organizations. In fact, in 2015, I remember as a SRG for Central Africa, we made a proposal, and Dr. Chambas is aware of this, about the necessity of this meeting between the two organizations. We had first a summit of ECAS in Yaoundé. Unfortunately, as you know, ECAS summits are very difficult to hold because they usually don't attend. When you speak of a summit in ECAS, maybe 2 or 3 heads of state will attend. And of course, this is a problem. There is no political will in that region so far. Recently, I saw some positive developments in this regard. There has been reforms in ECAS, Economic Community of Central Africa, which are very heartening. Maybe this could be a good news for the summit between ECAS and ECOWAS. But we must also confess that recently ECOWAS also has not been up to all its duties. Gone are the days where ECOWAS was very dynamic, must say, under the leadership of Nigeria, Ghana, etc. But today, when you look at how ECOWAS went about the crisis in Mali and other political crises in the region, we must not be very optimistic about this, honestly, if we are honest with ourselves, beyond the diplomatic considerations. So I think, anyway, it is important to call for that meeting, ECOWAS and ECAS. What I have seen recently, AU would come with its mission. The mission has, in fact, returned back to Addis. And I think next week we are going to hold the peace and security meeting to assess the fact-finding results of the the report of the fact-finding mission. We will see what will happen, whether they will just condone the military takeover, because obviously there has been a military coup d'etat after after the death of Deby, whether we will stick to that and just condone it and accept it, or push for, dialogue, push for an inclusive dialogue, we will see. ECAS also has sent a mission. The chairperson of AU went to Brazzaville to meet with President Sassou Nguesso, who is the current chair of ECAS. So there are a lot of diplomatic maneuvering so far. But what is most important is what will happen inside the country. Of course, some opposition parties have accepted to join the government, the transition government, but other opposition parties are outside and are even calling for a demonstration tomorrow, along with some civil society organization. So the situation is very unstable. And also the rebel groups have not said their last word yet. As Dr. Fatau has said, they went back to southern Libya and trying to regroup with different movements. Will they come back, under which conditions? Given the past, the experience of the past, it is not sure that the army of Chad would be able really to push them back unless, again, France intervene strategically, logistically, etc., etc. So the situation is still very volatile inside the country. This is why it is, in my opinion, it's important for a quick initiative, showing the political will of Africans first to deal with this issue, not just to condone the military takeover, but to push the military to come to accept dialogue, discussion with all the stakeholders. Idriss Deby came to power through a rebel movement, just as Hissène Habré did for the 30 years before him. So rebel movement to take power is a kind of pattern in Chad. So I think today it's important to do this, to tell the military that there is no option for the long-term stability for Chad to have an inclusive dialogue with all the forces, civil society, political leaders, rebel groups, and this will stabilize the situation. I would say that also the civil society organization has also to come together, including think tanks. As you know, recently, civil society organization from the Sahel area has launched an organization called Alliance Sahel, calling for a change of strategy, a change of paradigm in tackling the issues of peace and security in the region. Namely, the emphasis should be put on governance issues, on the respect for human rights. So I think there is this initiative of some civil society organization, I must say, almost over 100 civil society organizations. And I think think tanks like yours should come and join this kind of initiative and have a broader and even more efficient initiative to back what the government are doing. Otherwise, we will go on with this military strategy, which is not appropriate for solving the issues of peace and security in the Sahel. And all the countries, be those from West Africa, be from Central Africa, North Africa, have to realize that through our collective political will, we can come together, we must come together and chart a new course for the African people. And it is a duty for all of us to do that. Otherwise, we will be left with a military takeover one after the other. The military diplomacy has been the decision by Idriss Deby. No, this is his culture. He has a military culture. He is a warrior king. He is not interested in political in democratic transition. Unfortunately, what happened to him is the result of this option. And we have to avoid this in the future. Chad has to come back to normalcy as a democratic transition through dialogue. We know, Takia has said that, Dr. Shambas, etc. Of course, our democratic transitions experiences are not very conclusive yet, but still, it's a better option than just all military. I stop there.
Thank you very much, Prof. Can I quickly give the floor to my brother Abdel-Fatau so that he can add a few things, and then since we are now short of time, we will then.
Thank you so much, and I think, look, I fully agree with all the, proposals that have been, made. My brother, Atta Mensah, we've been having this debate for a long time now. Look, going forward, regarding Chad, what I think is that we are going to have the status quo for a number of years, because the Chadian ability to defeat past rebellions was because of the decisive role of French air power, in the country. So as long as it continues, probably the military transition will not find any reason, to change course. Unfortunately, this is realpolitik we are talking about here. But for me, two things come out of this very rich exchange of opinion. And that is, Africa is facing an existential threat. Okay, it's socioeconomic is very important aspect, but we are facing an existential threat in Africa. Unlike the traditional powers that dominated Africa, economy-wise, politics-wise, military-wise, today, Africa has gone so low that the Gulf states are setting up bases on the continent. Whether you are talking about Qatar, whether you are talking about United Arab Emirates, you are talking about Turkey and other, Africa is becoming another war zone for dominance. And we need to rise up to the challenge. So all these things that we are talking, look, ECOWAS, AU, ECAS, they have all been defunct. If we have to be very blunt and things like that, whether we are not going to go towards coalitions of the willing, to deal with the threat that we are, facing today. And that is the asymmetric warfare that we are facing, and all the powers have evolved their military approaches to such an extent that today all of them are deploying what we call hybrid warfare. Whether you are talking about the little green men, Russia, little blue men, China, you are talking about the so-called contractors, who are operating, South African mercenaries and others. They are auxiliary forces. And if we don't come to terms with it, it's going to be very difficult. So we need to go back to the Africa Standby Force concept, and then to see with all the reservations that Atta Mensah has said, if you cannot defend yourself, you are going to be dominated. And that is what history has taught us. That's important. Regarding the socioeconomic, the political economy, so to speak, look, if you look at what is happening now, just a few days ago, France decided to, sort of transfer 5 billion francs CFA to the Central Africa Bank for the Francophone countries. It is the result of mounting pressure from the grassroots, from others about the opposition to the domination of the, CFA by France and things like that. There's a movement. There is a lot to be done. We have structures like the African Continental Free Trade the area, which is hosted in Ghana here. What are some of the thoughts that we can bring to it about, intra-African trade, and then presenting a common front, with regard to our foreign partners? A small country in Europe will invite African leaders, and 52 African leaders will go there, to go and meet one small country, because of, what the situation is today. And we need to change it. We should have pride in ourselves. What I will say is that, look, every generation, like one of our revolutionary philosophers said, discover a mission, either to fulfill it or to betray it. Today, I think we have that responsibility, to the two sides of it. All these meetings, ECOWAS and other things, they are very good, but I think they have to be very practical thinking about how to, overturn this continent, the richest in the world and the poorest in the world.
It's inside, okay. It's his internet. Can you hear me? I'm not sure if the others can hear me, but I think the point has, or the various for having taken the time and the trouble to join us in this conversation. And we promise you that we'll follow it up with practical steps along the lines that you have suggested. And would you want to thank Ambassador? Yes.
Very quickly to say a big thank you to Professor Bathily and Abdel-Fatau. As you can see, you've got a lot of us very excited about the potential that we have to contribute to all these issues of governance, etc. We've heard what Dr. Chambers said. We've heard what Ambassador Winando and even Pichua and so on and so forth. You have thrown us a challenge as council, and trust me, we will be doing some follow-up work very quickly. Unfortunately, Dr. Chambers is in town, so he knows I'll be hounding him from tomorrow. I cannot say how very grateful we are, Professor Bathily and Abdel-Fatau, for such wonderful presentations, and to assure you that since you've given us a charge to see what we as CFR can do to contribute to improvement in governance, etc., you'll be hearing from us. Thank you very much, and all of you for joining us. And we will be, and Dr. Ambassador Cabral, I'm here, I want to say a quick thank you.
Prof, I want to say negative, and I know you're doing well.
Thank you.
I thought I should place on record.
I enjoyed it all. Thank you.
You should place on record our appreciation, because
looking forward.
After my discussions with Abdel-Fatau, and I got in touch with you, within minutes, you were back, and that's why we have this very interesting meeting today. We look forward to working with you. And since Dakar is my old quartier, I'll be coming very soon. And I hope to call on you.
Dr. Fatau is my accomplice for a long time.
Thank you all very much. And we hope that we'll see you soon at our next lecture. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you.
Yo.